Well, hey everyone, my name is Nathan Jones, and if you're new here, welcome. I talk about all things movies, specifically Blu-rays, and today we are continuing with my Week 6 journey, where I am going through my own film journey. I've been chronologically going through it in an actual physical journal on top of Letterboxd, but that's where I have my short snippets of things, and then this is where I'm actually putting a lot of my thoughts into this. And this is a really cool experiment that I've been doing, and this is Week 6, of course, so this is covering August 18th through the 24th. I know we're about to be on September, so I'm just a week behind every week, but I have to think about the things that I've been watching, and honestly, I just want to give myself some space between that amount of time. That way I can share, the things that have affected me in my own personal life. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be covering Week 6 as we've been going through this in a really fun way. I've been picking up a few titles. I also have a few films and TV to talk about today, and we gotta talk about episode 8 of Twin Peaks. And at the end of the video, I'm also going to be spotlighting somebody in the community. They've posed a really excellent question that I think is something to think about. So I definitely want to spotlight that and highlight them. They've been around for a while, so I'm excited to talk about that. So let's jump into the film journey where I'm talking about Week 6. Let's start off with Sunday, August 18th. So the last time I was here, I covered these 3 titles right here, these A24 titles that I picked up. And I got these a couple weeks ago, knowing that I was going to watch these, and I had the budget for it to, pick these things out. And I was really impressed by Love Lies Bleeding, which I talked about last time. But I also just wanted to keep this journey going, and so I decided, you know what? I picked all these titles up, might as well watch them all right now, right? So on Sunday, of course, I watched Showing Up and I watched Zone of Interest. Now, I did recently talk about these films in a video more in depth, and I'll link that in the description down below. But that's where I kind of talk about my A24 journey here a little bit. But Sunday was a lot of fun in terms of showing up, or at least thinking about this film. And then, of course, being devastated by Zone of Interest, which still haunts me to this day. But fantastic films, and Sunday definitely was a treat. Also, speaking of Sunday, I had to keep going with Twin Peaks. I started The Return. So last time we talked about this series, wow, we just talked about The Missing Pieces and Fire Walk with Me, which was devastating to me. And the fact that I was now journeying and venturing into this thing 25 years later, this was a treat. So we're going to jump into this as well and talk about some of this during the week. But before I jump into Twin Peaks The Return, let's jump into some titles I also picked up on the weekend. I also went by my local Entertain Mart, which is like a vintage stock adjacent company, and I picked up a few titles. So I actually got a few titles here to show you. 2 of them I have seen, which I'll talk about this week, and then 2 of them I have not yet. But the first film I want to talk about is Blood Moon, right here, this Aussie exploitation film from Severin, which I got, and this came out in 1989, so we'll talk about this a little bit later, because that's one of the ones I watched. Another film that I watched, another kind of tragic film, I've always known about the history of this movie, is The Island of Dr. Moreau. This is from Scream Factory. I got it with the slipcover, if you care about those kind of things. But I was always really curious about this movie. So we'll talk about this one as well, kind of towards the end of the week. And then the other 2 films that I picked up at Entertain Mart was one called Cemetery Man. I think I cannot pronounce the real name, but I know it goes by another name, and but I've heard really fantastic things about this. But of course I've been in a Savoy mood lately, and I know I'm saying it wrong probably, but I've been super into their work and have been really enjoying it. So I'm really excited to check out Cemetery Man when I get the chance to watch this. I cannot think of the title of that film. And the last film I want to talk about is starring one of my favorite actors in modern era, and that is Mads Mikkelsen in The Promised Land. So this is, I guess, an epic of sorts. I think he is a captain. Yeah, Captain Ludwig Kallen, and is taking over this land. I don't really know much about it, but I've heard nothing but critical acclaim for this film, so I'm really excited to jump into this as well. So yeah, I have a couple of films that I'm really excited to dive into, and then a couple of schlocky movies that we'll talk about near the end of the week. So let's actually now jump a little bit back towards the week, where of course I just picked up these titles on Sunday. I also watched a few titles from A24, and so Sunday was kind of a really good day to start and end a lot of different things. So I also started Twin Peaks: The Return. So now let's jump into Twin Peaks. So right now there's going to be spoilers. So if you are watching this right now or haven't seen it, skip to this part and then we'll get back to the normal show. But Twin Peaks. So I am finally on The Return. And The Return is totally very different from the first original series that came out in the early 90s. And season 1 and 2 were a lot more melodramatic. This one is a little bit more on the Lynch has made a couple of things in between this, but also at the same time made it more strange. The mystery is still there. Obviously, at this point with Fire Walk with Me, we have seen that Laura Dern is a key to a lot of things, but also at the same time, Cooper is now missing in the Black Lodge. His doppelganger is now loose. Bob is inhabiting that doppelganger. And so what happened? Now we're in The Return. 25 years later, Laura Dern had warned about this, that they would see Cooper again. So we meet Cooper again in the room, and we start seeing some really strange things. But before we jump into that, the first pilot episode is really wonderful. It's really long, but also like you're kind of figuring out like what is the tone of this series, right? So episode 1, we get introduced to this box that is locked up in New York City, and this up at this apartment which is being watched and monitored 24/7 all the time. The batteries need to be changed out constantly. Something keeps popping in and out of the box, but we really don't know what's going on. So that's what's happening in New York. We go back to Twin Peaks. We start seeing some familiar faces, of course, and we see the diner and we also go and visit Cooper, who is gone. But we also see the new Cooper, who is the doppelganger, as he is going through town and has come back to Twin Peaks because I think he disappeared not too long after he inhabited his body. But that's where The Return kind of starts. And I'm actually not going to get too in depth with the details of this, although I do want to kind of mention a few things and kind of just talk about it thematically up until episode 8. But this season has some really interesting twists and turns. And when I say that, I mean there are some moments that feel like the original Twin Peaks, that has that melodramatic side where we're meeting our characters, and there's also a lot of new characters that are really interesting to kind of latch onto, but they're also have made relationships with other people, and some people are in the same exact position that they were before. And I always think it's kind of fascinating just to revisit it, but actually going there 25 years later is such a big deal. But the tone actually gets a lot more Lynch. And so how Cooper escapes this zone, much by the episode 3, he finally escapes this crazy Lynchian world where there's this steampunk kind of aesthetic that's going on with this woman who's got no eyes but is warning him but can't speak. Everything's backwards, obviously. If you know about the Black Lodge, everything is kind of said backwards, or things can't be said. And so Cooper escapes through this. Electricity is huge, and escapes through almost like this this plug-in. Why can't I think of what I call this? But anyway, this outlet, and he gets in and out of the world. He gets back into the world. He inhabits this guy named Douglas Jones, who is a scumbag, and in fact, he happens to be another doppelganger. Because at the same time, the doppelganger that Bob has also gets stopped because he's trying to prevent going back to the Black Lodge. He's trying to stop going back inside that area again. And so the crazy thing is, he gets captured and gets sent to prison at this point in the story. Whereas Cooper is now Dougie Jones. So there's 2 doppelgangers. All right. So Cooper is now embodying Dougie Jones, and then there's the doppelganger who has Bob, who is stuck in prison. So that's kind of the first 3 episodes. There's a lot of other things in between that. I'm not going to get in too much depth here, but I just thought it was interesting to kind of go down that rabbit hole first and see that science fiction side of Lynch. And we'll get to that when we get to episode 8, because that is a science fiction episode. But regardless, we meet a lot of different cast and characters, like Laura Dern's character, Denise, who is definitely a real riot in terms of not giving taking anyone's shit, really. And we also see Gordon again, who is David Lynch, who is trying to piece together. He's actually become one of the big main characters of this the series, honestly. And so is Albert, who is also in the original series, who is always his opposite, like the curmudgeon FBI agent who is always kind of pawing against Cooper, because Cooper is always looking at the bright side. Albert always is kind of cynical about things. So we see them interview the doppelganger who got caught in prison, and some weird stuff starts happening. The doppelganger is about to escape, though, and he does with the help of bribing the sheriff, and things kind of go wild from there. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have Dougie, who is now in Las Vegas, who actually is taken over this body, who I guess the Douglas Jones that was kind of a greasy, gross, fat person who definitely had some pretty sketchy things going on in their life. And he's now inhabited by Cooper, who looks exactly like Cooper, but Cooper is literally like this the whole time. Very like just not there. It's like very tabula rasa. A lot of things aren't, he's not present, right? He's just responding to things. If somebody says something like coffee, he gets excited. He starts getting hints of things from his past, but at the same time, he's just Dougie, and he's super fun. And tonally, this is where I think a lot of people may have not liked the shift from season 1 and 2 to the return, is seeing less of Cooper, because Cooper is really just piecing himself back together as he's going through Dougie. But they're really drawn out scenes mixed in with the Lynchian stuff. So it's comical, and it's got that mystery aspect of it too. And you also have Janie, who is his wife, who is angry with Dougie for being gone for 3 days. But there's a hilarious montage episode, I think episode 4, is where Dougie gets dropped off at a casino, and as he's just inhabiting, Cooper is now inhabiting that body, has won a lot of money, and he meets Janie, his wife, and she's really mad at him, but then is happy because he has all this money. So there's a lot of criminal things going on kind of in the background of this as well. It almost reminds me of a procedural drama, as well as a mystery. So they're in Vegas, there's New York, which has that mysterious box, and then you're in Twin Peaks with all of the cast and crew, for the most part, from the original series, doing their own thing. So it's a very interesting kind of dynamic with these things, and we're kind of understanding the doppelganger aspect, because there's 2 doppelgangers now. So that's kind of, I feel like, a good thematic thing with the first few episodes. There's a lot of things I'm not covering, and the other thing that I do want to mention is all the songs that have been playing. Near the end of every episode, there's actually something interesting where we have different bands who are actually playing at the lodge, or at the Bang Bang bar, actually, where they're playing one of their songs as the credits start happening. And I really love that touch. In fact, there's a lot of bands that I've discovered now from this, just by going and watching this show. And it's been really entrancing. And that's the thing, I think, thematically, that I've, one of the special moments where you kind of see yourself lost within the music itself, but you're so entranced by Lynch's story here of the return that you're buying so much into it. At least that's how I see it. But I really loved the first 7 episodes, even if it tried me a lot too. My patience was tried quite a bit. So anyone who maybe is not a fan of this, I completely understand. But for me, I really enjoyed the aesthetic of everything, and things kind of coming together and going apart, and some scenes that are like, what's going on in this? So episode 8 is considered one of the best hours of television of all time. I cannot help but agree with that. That was an absolutely mind-boggling experience to watch it. It reminded me of 2001: A Space Odyssey mixed with Tarkovsky and like Lynch, right? Lynch with like a razor head and the strange things that he's done in the past, of course. But like, wow. I know I just mentioned the music. Guess who actually happens to be in the middle of this episode playing at the Bang Bang Bar? It's 9 Inch Nails. And they play wonderfully and horrifically, because 9 Inch Nails obviously is that industrial band that kind of mixes the sounds together to make this dystopian and terrifying image, and it kind of just jumps into a montage of horrifying moments and very bombastic and very beautiful moments as well. But man, it's hard to explain this episode. I don't know if I can explain it. It's definitely something to watch. It is a visual feast of an episode. And explaining Nine Inch Nails, segueing into the sequences that are a lot more surreal, into the Lynch world, that's where things start becoming really, really messed up. And also, I didn't even mention the beginning of this episode has the doppelganger who is possessed by Bob, who gets shot and is getting eaten by the woodsman. And the woodsman I haven't talked about at all, but these men who kind of look like homeless people with beards who keep flashing in and out of existence. You can kind of see that and that effect. They went and eat the doppelganger and cover him with blood, and it gets into the Nine Inch Nails segment, and then it gets into the surreal segment. And the sequence of that is like, it reminded me of watching Fire Walk with Me, being this huge cinematic experience, but at the same time turning this left turn that turns into this entire other thing that honestly I need to revisit and rewatch just to experience the visual feast that this episode is. Like the way that this ends as well, I just mentioned the woodsman. The surreal aspect of the episode kind of ends in a more surreal aspect, almost like a John Carpenter-esque aspect, where it reminds me of The Fog in sorts, where these woodsmen come out, start terrorizing this area, and keep asking, "Got a light?" And that's the episode title of this one. And it is piercing how scary that question is, because of the things that I watched and witnessed. It is a terrifying episode, but it is a beautiful episode. It is one of the best things I've ever watched on television. I mean, I can only think of like Battle of the Bastards from Game of Thrones being up there in terms of episodes that like are cemented in my mind of TV. Like, it is just incredible. So episode 8 is worth it alone, going through episodes 1 through 7 just to get to episode 8. Like, it is tremendous. But that's enough of Twin Peaks. So I'll get back into this a little bit later as we finish The Return. Let's go back in the week where I actually had a little bit of a break from Twin Peaks, and I wanted to laugh a little bit. Earlier on in the week, I also watched a movie with my friend Danny. We watched the movie Shaolin Soccer. And now this movie is really, really stupid. It's from 2001. It's directed by Stephen Chow, who directed the film Kung Fu Hustle, which I'm a big fan of. I remember watching that movie when it came out. I think I went to the movie theater to watch that, and I think that might have been one of the first films that I had watched that was dubbed. There were subtitles in it. But regardless, Kung Fu Hustle, this is obviously the film that he made before it, and is about some brothers who all have these weird superpowers on the different parts of their body, and they develop a soccer team. That's kind of the premise of the story, is it's getting all these guys together to fight together. And I just had a good time with my friend, and honestly, I would love to get a Blu-ray of this movie. It's definitely very dated for its time, but if you like stupid humor, this is the type of movie that will definitely, check that mark off the checkbox for you. But anyway, I had such a fun time with it. Even if it was stupid as hell, I'd probably give it a 3.5 out of 5. It was a good time. So I had a fun time with my friend, and it was good to break Twin Peaks a little bit and not be stuck in that surreal world with Cooper, or just be like Dougie Jones having a good time. So I went through Twin Peaks during the week, but that weekend I dog sat a little bit, so I was able to watch some Netflix shows, but I also watched these on my own as well. I watched The Island of Dr. Moreau and Blood Moon. So let's talk about The Island of Dr. Moreau. I watched this early morning, and definitely was one of the weirdest things to kind of wake up really early to, and I'm just fascinated by the history of this movie. So this movie is directed by John Frankenheimer, who has made incredible films like the movie Seconds, of course. It has a crazy cast here. We have Val Kilmer, we have David Thewlis, who is Remus in the Harry Potter films, Fairuza Balk, who I love in The Craft and also Waterboy, and we have Marlon Brando. And Marlon Brando is the push and the star of this film, right? Obviously, this came out in the 90s, where Marlon Brando is kind of nearing the end of his career. This came out in 1996, and I guess the story of this movie was that this has been tried so many times, and this is what came about from it. And there's some fun parts about this movie. It's not a good movie, I will say that. The acting is not my favorite. I think Val Kilmer is kind of the one who's the least important in here, at least the most over the top. Even though Marlon Brando's character is a complete over the top character, I actually enjoyed him in this movie, weirdly enough. And based on the special features, because I watched some special features on here as well with the makeup effects supervisor Shane Mahan. Anyway, that he describes being on set that Marlon Brando kind of wasn't the problem, which is really strange because I know Marlon Brando's always kind of been interesting in terms of does he work well with others, and a lot of the times, more often than not, no. But The Island Dr. Moreau, I think the best thing about this movie is the effects. The practical effects in here were actually a lot of fun. These creatures who are sentient animals like wolves, a hyena, they are the ones that are really interesting, and I really love the fact that they're talking and they're also like menacing at the same time, but you can tell that the practical effects there was a lot of love put into it, and that's probably the biggest highlight I will have of this movie is definitely the practical effects. There are definitely some close-up shots. There's a lot of close-up shots, and you can definitely see the hair and the sweat and the gleam of all, and the blood, I guess, of all these different creatures who are fighting our main character, who is David Thewlis, and who is landed on this island and is ran by the crazy Dr. Moreau, who's played by Marlon Brando. Despite it being not so good, I definitely would not recommend people watch this unless they are diehard fans of the story behind this movie, but also if you are a fan of horror films and practical effects. This is definitely something to check out, but it's definitely not something to go right home about. I would give it a 2 out of 5, probably. The practical effects alone making it the fun part of this movie. But yeah, Island Dr. Moreau is all right. And the other movie that I watched too was another one that I didn't really click with as much as I would have liked, and that is Blood Moon right here, the exploitation film from '89. This movie was just a little too long. Like, that was my biggest complaint about this movie is it was a little longer than I wanted it to be, but also the kills were not as inventive or as fun as I would like to have seen, or as often, I suppose, because of the length of the movie itself. I feel like the spacing between the kills definitely you felt that it dragged. It felt like a student film of sorts. It's an interesting title, and if you're into the horror mood, which I'm starting to get into as we're starting to get closer and closer to the spooky season, I definitely want to watch some more horror films. So that's the reason kind of why I wanted to watch things like this. But Blood Moon, I would probably give it like a 1 out of 5. It's not that good. And just definitely was not a good time. So also this weekend I dog sat, and where I wanted to stream films, and so that's pretty much the only way I could watch movies over there. So I also watched a few things that I hadn't seen on streaming. The first one being Long Shot from 2019 with Seth Rogen and Charlize Theron, and I actually had a good time with this movie. The movie, I didn't realize that their chemistry was going to be as fun as I expected it to be. It's just fun seeing the dynamic of Charlize Theron's character, who is Secretary of State, trying to become the presidential candidate, and you see Seth Rogen's character, who is this loser from her hometown that she remembers growing up, who runs into him again, and there's a bond that happens between them, even though you're like, wait a minute, this doesn't seem right, but at the same time they love each other, and it's a really cute and kind of comical story here. It's nothing to write home about. It's nothing fantastic or anything, but it's just got a lot of charm, and I think that's the biggest thing I would say about Long Shot that I enjoyed the most of. But I'd give this movie a 3 out of 5. It was a good time. I had fun. The other films that I watched, I'll just kind of read off of my journal here. I watched Untold: The Murder of Eyre McNair. And this was an interesting title. I was kind of half paying attention as I was doing other things, taking care of the dogs and whatnot. But it's talking about the epic rise of Steve McNair and his his almost championship. He lost by 1 yard. That was probably the most interesting thing about this documentary. But it also later turned into a murder mystery, a mystery that was eventually ruled as a murder-suicide that leaves a little bit more questions than it has the answers. It wasn't anything to write home about. It's definitely like a 2.5 out of 5 type of documentary, maybe even a 2 out of 5. It's nothing like that like really struck me. I guess because I've been in Twin Peaks mood and watching other movies, I've kind of not been in that headspace. But it seemed interesting, so I wanted to check that out. And then after that, I watched the movie Jackpot, which just came out. It's got John Cena and Awkwafina in it, and another buddy cop film that kind of reminded me going back to Long Shot, where you're like, wait, these two are together? So Awkwafina and John Cena, didn't expect it. Cool premise of a story where California is in the future, and you see California has this lottery now, the state lottery, where you can win like I think billions of dollars, but there's one catch. You only have 24 hours to survive once you are announced as the winner, and you are able to be killed. And you're able to be killed by everything but guns. So no bullets, nothing like that, but you can get stabbed, you can die in all sorts of ways. But it's really interesting to kind of see that premise and the farcical nature of it, and turn it into a comedy, of course, with Awkwafina and John Cena, and have been in a lot of good comedic roles as of late. So I was really looking forward to this, and actually I was surprised by how much I enjoyed it. It kind of reminded me of a buddy cop film of sorts, where this partnership definitely does not seem to fit on paper, but they turn out to be best friends towards the end as they try to survive getting the jackpot and having to deal a lot of violent things. But Jackpot was a good time. I'd give it a 3 out of 5. It was definitely something not to write home about, but at the same time, definitely something to check out, and some good popcorn movie. The other thing I want to say is, as we're kind of ending the week, let's jump into the Spotlight Corner, where I spotlight one of the creators in this space who actually posed a really interesting question this week, and I'm really curious to hear other people's opinions about it. So let's jump over there, and I'll see you here in a second. And welcome to the Spotlight Corner. And this week I want to talk about my buddy Mike, Gray1951. He's got a great channel and has been on this platform for quite some time. I'd love to have on the YouTube, like on the Film Journey sometime, but he put out a very interesting video talking about what makes a film great, and posed this to the community and asked that question by talking a little bit about Chinatown, but also Gone with the Wind, and that was some of his examples, and kind of crossing the, well, there's things that could be objectively and subjectively great, and obviously some people might have different premises and connotations to what great means, and I really like the way he discusses things, especially when it comes to that concept. But then it got me thinking, you know what, maybe I should make a video myself talking about what makes a film great, and what my criteria is for that greatness, I suppose. And it's really personal. I think it is personal for everybody. So that's my thing to you as well, who is watching this. Go check out Mike's video. I really enjoyed this concept, and it is very interesting to think about in terms of the volume of films that we all watch and the things that we rewatch, and what we deem is great. So that being said, go check out that video and let me know what you think about that concept. But yeah, I'll go see you back over there as we finish the video. So don't forget to check out Mike's channel. That was a very interesting video and very interesting topic to think about. What is a great movie, and how do we define it ourselves? I might have to make a video myself thinking about that very question. But with that being said, I hope you enjoyed week 6. I hope you enjoyed my crazy Twin Peaks journey, even if it was a little light on terms of talking about a lot of it. And then also the other films that I watched throughout the week as I was kind of, recovering from Twin Peaks. And how about episode 8? If anyone's seen episode 8, tell me, whoa. Tell me down in the comment section how wonderful it is. Or if you hate it, tell me about it. So anyway, I want to say thank you so much for watching this video. Give it a like, comment down below, share, hit the notification bell, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. I'm not jonesing around.